North Korea's economy is supposed to be impossible. By every standard metric of modern finance, this system should have reached terminal failure decades ago. It's suffocated by sanctions, cut off from global capital. Defined by chronic shortages of food, fuel, and electricity, on a GDP chart, it looks like a fossil. And yet, the lights, at least in Pyongyang, stay on. This creates an uncomfortable realization. What if we've been measuring the wrong thing? What if North Korea's economy isn't a failed system waiting to collapse, but a deliberately engineered system designed to endure? If your objective function isn't prosperity, but political survival, the math changes. In this system, efficiency is a threat, growth is a risk. And scarcity? Scarcity is not a failure. It is a tool. Today, we're going inside the world's most resilient economic fortress to understand the cold mechanics of a survival economy. How a regime turns permanent shortage into control. How a $1 to $2 billion trade pipe becomes national oxygen. And why stability in North Korea is just another word for permanently managed desperation. Part 1. This is not a normal economy. Most countries run an economy like a firm. They chase output. They chase productivity. They chase rising living standards. North Korea runs an economy like a security system. The output that matters isn't GDP, it's predictability, control, and the absence of mass instability. This is the first mistake outsiders make. They look at blackouts, hunger, outdated factories, and see failure. Pyongyang looks at the same things and sees costs of maintaining power. There's a brutal concept hiding here: the marginal utility of power. At very low levels of income, every extra calorie matters. But once a population is kept just above collapse, further improvement delivers diminishing political returns and rising political risk. When people are constantly managing survival, they don't organize for tomorrow. They focus on today. In that sense, hunger isn't mismanagement, it's governance. This economy is not built to win a race. It is built to avoid a crash. Think of it like a ship designed only for storms. It is slow, uncomfortable, inefficient, but it is extremely hard to sink. That's why collapse predictions keep failing. They assume the system wants to grow. It doesn't. Part 2. Scarcity as a control mechanism. In North Korea, scarcity is not just something that happens, it's something the system can deploy. Food, fuel, housing, jobs. These are not commodities, they are permissions. When basic needs are tightly allocated, people don't just buy them, they wait for them, they comply for them, they negotiate for them. This is the logic of rationing. And it's not evenly applied. Scarcity is hierarchical. Resources flow first to strategic nodes, the military, the political core, key cities, critical industries. Everyone else lives on thinner margins. International data gives us a glimpse of how tight those margins are. The World Food Program has estimated that roughly 10 million people, around 40% of the population, are undernourished. That number alone doesn't explain the system, but it tells you something crucial. This economy operates permanently at the edge of physical stress. In a normal system, that's a warning sign. In a survival system, it's an operating condition. Chronic scarcity keeps society dependent, and dependence is easier to manage than abundance. Part 3. The shadow market is a tactical retreat. A fully rationed system has a problem. Pressure builds, and pressure needs a release valve. That's where North Korea's informal markets, often called jangmadang, come in. These markets are often misunderstood as liberalization. They are not. This is not the regime embracing capitalism. It is the regime outsourcing survival risk. The state learned an uncomfortable lesson. It cannot feed everyone all the time. So it allows people to find food themselves, as long as they don't organize, politicize, or accumulate independent power. Markets are tolerated when they reduce pressure, cracked down on when they grow too autonomous. This isn't reform, it's traffic control. The market is allowed to exist like a side street. It eases congestion, but it can never become the highway. Recent reporting shows tighter border controls and enforcement cycles that directly affect how these markets function. Not to eliminate them, but to remind everyone who ultimately controls flow. The shadow economy isn't a rival, it's a pressure valve. Part 4. External dependence without integration. North Korea depends on the outside world, but very selectively. Most countries trade to integrate: supply chains, finance, standards, investment. North Korea trades like someone using a tap. Turn it on when necessary, turn it down when risky. Never let the pipe become leverage. In practice, this means trade concentrated through very narrow channels, overwhelmingly with China. Based on Chinese customs data cited by Reuters, total China-North Korea trade has hovered around $1.2 billion in some recent years. That is tiny by global standards, but for a survival economy, it's oxygen. Now layer sanctions on top. UN restrictions cap refined petroleum supplies, commonly cited at 500,000 barrels per year. That forces the system into extreme energy discipline. The result is a narrow, fragile, but controllable external connection. North Korea would rather have a small pipe it can manage than a large integration it can't control. Part 5. Why sanctions didn't collapse the system. Sanctions are very good at destroying growth. They are much worse at destroying survival. Because sanctions hurt open systems the most, North Korea is already closed. So sanctions often do something else. They reshape distribution. They increase scarcity, which the state already knows how to manage politically. They push activity into gray zones, which are easier to gatekeep. They raise the value of access, which strengthens whoever controls permission. This creates a paradox. Sanctions raise suffering, but can also strengthen gatekeepers. You even see strange data points. Bank of Korea estimates, reported by Reuters, suggested North Korea's economy grew by about 3% in 2023 after contracting the year before. That doesn't mean recovery. It means the survival machine found a new seam. Even a sealed room has temperature changes. Sanctions raise the cost of prosperity. They do not guarantee political failure. Part 6. What this economy teaches the world. Here's the part that travels. Resilience is not the same as prosperity. North Korea shows a model where control substitutes for efficiency. Scarcity substitutes for incentives. Shadow markets substitute for private sectors. Trade exists without integration. It is extreme. But the logic isn't unique. Any system that prioritizes stability over growth, that manages dependence as a political variable, that treats shortages as governance tools, is operating on a similar axis, just with softer edges. Once you understand the objective function, many irrational choices stop looking irrational. They become trade-offs. The most dangerous assumption is believing that systems you don't understand must be unstable. North Korea's economy is not built to make people rich. It is built to make the state hard to break. That is why it can look weak and still persist. Why collapse predictions can fail for decades. The real question is not why North Korea is poor. It's what the world should learn from an economy that proves one thing very clearly. If you are willing to pay the human cost, you can turn a country into a fortress that never collapses and never truly lives. Stay curious, stay sharp.